A new beginning, a familiar fear. The moving truck groaned as it rolled onto the quiet suburban streets of Oakwood Heights, its massive tires crunching the loose gravel along the driveway. The neighborhood was eerily still, save for the occasional rustling of autumn leaves in the crisp afternoon breeze. Each house was nearly identical, white picket fences, pristine lawns, and well-maintained gardens arranged in neat rows, as if part of some suburban dream carefully curated for picture-perfect families. But Jamal Carter knew better than to be fooled by the surface. Sitting in the back seat of his mother's car, he watched the movers unload their belongings with mechanical efficiency. His mother, Lisa Carter, sat in the driver's seat with a tired but hopeful smile, her hands resting on the steering wheel as she took in their new home. "This is it, Jamal. Our fresh start," she said, her voice laced with both exhaustion and optimism. "A good school, a safe neighborhood. It'll be different this time." Jamal didn't respond. He had heard these words too many times before. Different never lasted. This was their fifth move in 4 years. A pattern had formed, a new city, a new school, the same old story. He and his mother would arrive with high hopes, but sooner or later, something would go wrong. Sometimes it was a job that didn't work out, sometimes it was rent that got too high. Other times, it was the way people looked at them, the quiet judgment in their eyes, the polite distance they kept. "Come on," Lisa urged, stepping out of the car. "Let's get settled in." Jamal sighed and opened the car door, stepping onto the cracked pavement. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and damp earth, the remnants of a recent rain still clinging to the cool breeze. As he stretched his arms, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A glance around confirmed it. From the house across the street, an older man in a flannel shirt and khakis stood on his porch, arms crossed, eyes locked onto them with an expression that was impossible to decipher. Further down the block, a woman in yoga pants and a ponytail paused mid-jog, her gaze lingering just a second too long before she quickly looked away. And then there were the kids. A small group of teenagers stood near a street lamp at the corner, whispering amongst themselves. They weren't even subtle about it. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered boy with blonde hair and a smirk that screamed trouble, made direct eye contact with Jamal before nudging one of his friends and laughing. Jamal rolled his shoulders, exhaling slowly. "Here we go again. Come help me with these boxes," Lisa called out, breaking his thoughts. Jamal nodded, walking toward the moving truck. He grabbed one of the heavier boxes, hoisting it onto his shoulder with ease. Years of moving had made him strong, not just physically, but mentally. He had learned to keep his guard up, to be ready for anything. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and varnished wood. It was empty except for the furniture the movers were placing in their assigned spots. The walls were bare, the floors polished to a shine, and the kitchen counters still gleamed from a recent wipe-down. It was a nice house, better than some of the places they'd lived before. But something still felt off. Lisa was already in full nesting mode, directing the movers with a practiced efficiency that spoke of someone who had done this too many times. She wanted this to feel like home, even if deep down, she knew it might not last. By the time the movers left, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street. Jamal sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling, mentally preparing himself for what was coming next. New town. New school. Same old routine. The first night. Sleep didn't come easily. Jamal lay in bed, listening to the silence of the neighborhood. It was too quiet. Back in their old apartment, he was used to hearing car horns, distant sirens, and the occasional shouting match from a neighbor's window. Here, it was nothing but an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves against the house. And then he heard something else. A low, muffled whisper. He sat up, frowning. The sound was coming from outside. Slowly, he got out of bed and moved to his window, peering through the blinds. Across the street, near the dimly lit sidewalk, a few figures stood huddled together, their faces partially obscured by the shadows. He recognized the blonde-haired kid from earlier, the one who had smirked at him, along with two others. They were talking in hushed tones, occasionally glancing in the direction of his house. Jamal's jaw tightened. He had seen this before. The welcome party. Some kids in places like this didn't take kindly to newcomers, especially ones that looked like him. He knew better than to assume the worst, but experience had taught him that being cautious wasn't paranoia, it was survival. He closed the blinds and returned to bed. Tomorrow was the first day of school. He'd deal with it when the time came. The morning routine. Morning came too quickly. Jamal woke to the smell of bacon and coffee drifting from the kitchen. He threw on a pair of dark jeans and a plain hoodie, keeping it simple. His wardrobe choices weren't just about comfort, they were strategic. Neutral colors, nothing flashy. He had learned that standing out could attract the wrong kind of attention. Downstairs, his mother was already dressed for work, sipping her coffee as she flipped pancakes. "Good morning, baby," she said with a smile, placing a plate in front of him. "Morning," he muttered, grabbing a fork. Lisa sat across from him, her expression shifting into concern. "How'd you sleep?" Jamal shrugged. "Fine." She studied him for a moment, then sighed. "Look, I know you're nervous about today. But try to keep an open mind, okay? Not everyone is like." "I know, Mom," Jamal interrupted. Lisa hesitated before nodding. "Okay. Just, be careful." Jamal finished his breakfast and grabbed his backpack. As he stepped outside, the morning air was crisp, the sky painted in soft hues of pink and orange. The neighborhood still had that eerie stillness, like a place frozen in time. He hadn't even reached the sidewalk before he spotted them. Ryan, the blonde kid from last night, was leaning against a car parked across the street, arms crossed, his smirk ever present. His two friends flanked him, exchanging whispers. Jamal ignored them and kept walking. "Just get to school. Don't engage." As he passed them, Ryan chuckled. "See you at school, new kid." Jamal didn't look back. He already knew what was coming. The first day. The walk to Oakwood High felt longer than it should have. Jamal kept his hood up, hands in his pockets, his steps measured. The chill of the early morning air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. He was too busy preparing himself, mentally going over the usual routine. Walk in. Keep your head down. Find your classes. Don't get involved. But he already knew that wouldn't be possible. He could feel eyes on him. A few students on their way to school threw side glances his way. Some whispered to their friends. Others pretended not to notice him at all. The unspoken message was clear, he wasn't one of them. He had seen this before, in every school, in every town. The way newcomers, especially ones like him, were treated like outsiders. Up ahead, Oakwood High loomed in the distance. A large, well-maintained building with neatly trimmed hedges and banners boasting the school's championship football team. The words, "Home of the Oakwood Titans," were proudly displayed above the entrance in bold, blue letters. Jamal sighed. Another battlefield. Walking into the fire. The moment he stepped inside, the noise hit him like a wall. The halls were packed with students moving in every direction, locker doors slamming, laughter bouncing off the walls, sneakers squeaking against the polished floors. It was the usual chaos of high school, a storm of energy that had its own rhythm. Jamal scanned the hallway, taking it all in. The cliques were already formed, the jocks near the trophy case, the cheerleaders chatting by their lockers, the quieter kids huddled in groups near the classroom doors. He knew exactly where he fit in. Nowhere. Jamal tightened the straps on his backpack and moved toward the front office. He needed his schedule, and then he could figure out the rest. But before he could reach the door, someone stepped in front of him. Ryan. The same blonde-haired guy who had smirked at him yesterday. Up close, he was taller than Jamal had thought, about 6 feet 1 inch, broad-shouldered, with the overconfidence of someone who was used to being in charge. His Letterman jacket confirmed it, football player. Behind him, his 2 friends flanked him like loyal guards. Well, well. Look who decided to show up, Ryan said, loud enough for nearby students to hear. Welcome to Oakwood, new kid. Hope you don't get lost. Jamal exhaled through his nose. Not today. He sidestepped, but Ryan mirrored the movement, blocking his path. You didn't answer me, Ryan continued. His smirk widened. That's kinda rude. Jamal kept his expression unreadable. Didn't know I was required to. Some students nearby turned to watch. An audience. Exactly what Jamal didn't want. Ryan's smirk flickered for a split second, but then he chuckled. You got a mouth on you, huh? That might be a problem. Jamal stared at him, unmoving. He wasn't afraid. Ryan's type was predictable, the entitled bully who ran the school like it was his personal kingdom. He had dealt with plenty like him before. Ryan leaned in slightly. You know, Oakwood isn't really the kind of place for, he paused, glancing at Jamal's dark hoodie and the rich brown of his skin. The unfinished sentence lingered. Jamal's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. Don't take the bait. Whatever, man, Jamal muttered and walked past him. Ryan didn't stop him this time, but his voice followed. See you later, Carter, he said, his tone dripping with amusement. Jamal didn't turn around. But he knew this wasn't over. An unexpected ally. The rest of the morning was uneventful, just the usual introductions from teachers, the awkward shuffle of finding a seat in classes, and the quiet stares from classmates trying to figure him out. By lunchtime, he was exhausted. Jamal grabbed a tray and scanned the cafeteria. The room was filled with the typical social groups, athletes at the center tables, the rich kids near the windows, the gamers and quiet kids at the edges. Then he spotted something unexpected. A girl, sitting alone. She had dark curly hair pulled into a ponytail, warm brown skin, and wore a leather jacket over her hoodie. She wasn't looking at anyone, just picking at her food absent-mindedly. Jamal hesitated, then walked over. You mind if I sit here? He asked. She glanced up, eyes sharp and assessing. Then, after a pause, she shrugged. Your funeral. Jamal sat across from her, setting down his tray. That bad, huh? She smirked. Let's just say people don't usually sit with me. Why not? Her gaze flickered toward the jock table, where Ryan and his friends were laughing loudly. Same reason you got stopped this morning. Jamal raised an eyebrow. You saw that? Everyone saw that, she said, stabbing at her salad with a fork. Ryan's been the king of this place since middle school. People either follow him or stay out of his way. Jamal frowned. And you? Her smirk widened. I punch back. Jamal liked her already. Before he could say more, Ryan's voice cut through the noise. Hey, Carter. The entire cafeteria went quiet. Jamal turned. Ryan was standing near the jock table, grinning. He held up a football, spinning it in his hands. Since you're new here, how about a little test? You play? Jamal met his eyes, expression unreadable. Not interested. Ryan's grin didn't waver. Oh, come on. Just a friendly throw. See if you can handle it. Jamal knew what this was. A setup. Ryan wanted to humiliate him in front of everyone. But Jamal wasn't stupid. He slowly stood, walked over, and stopped a few feet away. Ryan tossed the ball casually. Catch. Jamal caught it with ease, his grip firm. Ryan's smirk widened. Nice hands. Now let's see how fast you are. Without warning, he lunged, grabbing for the ball, expecting to snatch it out of Jamal's hands. But Jamal didn't let go. Instead, he pivoted smoothly, twisting his body with perfect precision. Ryan was thrown off balance, stumbling forward as Jamal sidestepped effortlessly. The cafeteria gasped. Ryan straightened, eyes darkening. Lucky move. Jamal tossed the ball back. No luck involved. Ryan caught it, jaw tightening. He wasn't smiling anymore. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A challenge they won't forget. The fallout from lunch. The cafeteria was still buzzing after Jamal's effortless move against Ryan. People whispered, exchanged glances, and some even replayed the moment on their phones. Jamal had done nothing violent, just dodged Ryan like it was second nature. But that was exactly what made it worse. Ryan had looked foolish, and in his world, that was unforgivable. Jamal sat back down at his table, across from the girl he had just met. That was interesting, she said, smirking. Jamal sighed. Yeah, well, I didn't ask for it. You didn't have to. Ryan doesn't like being challenged. You humiliated him in front of his audience. She speared a cherry tomato with her fork. That means you're officially his problem. Jamal ran a hand over his face. Great. Exactly what I wanted on my first day. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. You handled yourself pretty well. Most people would have either backed down or gotten flattened. Jamal shrugged. I've been in worse situations. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Yeah? You fight or something? Jamal didn't answer. He had spent years learning discipline, control. His fists had been trained for something more than schoolyard fights. But he wasn't about to explain that to someone he just met. I just know how to move, he said finally. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. I believe it. Before he could say anything else, a voice interrupted them. Hey, Zarya, is this your new boyfriend? Jamal turned his head and saw a short, wiry guy standing near their table. He had wild curls and a cocky smirk, holding a skateboard under his arm. Zarya rolled her eyes. Tariq, shut up. Tariq ignored her and flopped into a seat beside Jamal. Dude, that move you pulled on Ryan? Legendary. I thought he was gonna explode. He snickered. That dude's been running this place like a king for years. No one ever makes him look bad. Yeah, well, Jamal muttered, I wasn't trying to. Tariq grinned. Doesn't matter. The point is, you did. And now, he's gonna be gunning for you. Jamal exhaled. He already knew that. Zarya sat back, her arms crossed. You should probably avoid him for a while. Let him cool down. Tariq chuckled. Ryan? Cool down? Nah, dude, he's already planning something. Just be ready. Jamal wasn't worried about Ryan. He was worried about what kind of stupid stunt Ryan would try to pull. The setup. Jamal kept his head down for the rest of the day, avoiding any unnecessary interactions. But he could feel the shift in the air, people watching him more, whispering behind his back. By the time the last class ended, he was exhausted. He had hoped Ryan would let it go. He was wrong. As soon as he stepped outside, he saw them. Ryan and his crew were waiting by the parking lot, leaning against a black pickup truck. Zarya and Tariq, who had been walking with him, slowed their steps. Ryan grinned when he saw Jamal. Yo, Carter. We got unfinished business. Jamal glanced at him, then kept walking. Not interested. Ryan pushed off the truck and stepped in front of him. See, that's the problem. You don't get to choose. Jamal sighed. Look, man, I don't have time for your little ego trip. Ryan's grin flickered, and his jaw tightened. Funny. I was gonna say the same thing. But, hey, I'll make it easy for you. Just a little one-on-one. Right here, right now. You win, I leave you alone. I win, you learn your place. Zarya groaned. This is so dumb. Tariq shook his head. Bro, you serious? Ryan smirked. What, you scared, Carter? Jamal looked at him for a long moment. He knew exactly what Ryan was trying to do, pressure him into fighting, force him into playing the new kid versus the king of the school game. Jamal wasn't interested. But Ryan wasn't going to stop. Jamal crossed his arms. What's the game? Ryan grinned. Wrestling. No punches, no kicks, just a takedown. First one to pin the other wins. Jamal resisted the urge to laugh. Ryan had no idea what he was asking for. I'm not playing your game, Jamal said simply. Ryan's grin widened. Then I guess you're just a coward. A small crowd had already started forming. Jamal sighed. There was no walking away now. Fine, he said. Let's get this over with. Ryan cracked his knuckles. Thought so. The fight. The makeshift ring was just a circle of students in the parking lot, cheering and hyping up the fight. Jamal pulled off his hoodie and stretched his arms. Stay calm. Stay focused. This isn't a real fight, it's just about control. Ryan, on the other hand, was grinning like he had already won. Ready? Someone called. Jamal nodded. Ryan lunged first. It was fast, but not fast enough. Jamal sidestepped at the last second, letting Ryan's momentum carry him forward. Ryan stumbled but recovered quickly. The crowd murmured. Ryan tried again, this time going for a low tackle. Bad move. Jamal turned his body, shifting his weight perfectly. With one smooth movement, he hooked his arm around Ryan's neck, twisted his hips, and flipped Ryan over his shoulder. Ryan slammed onto the pavement. The crowd gasped. Ryan groaned, dazed. He tried to get up, but Jamal was already on him. He moved like lightning, pinning Ryan's shoulders to the ground with a firm grip. 1, 2, 3, Zarya counted. The crowd erupted. Ryan lay there, stunned. His face burned with humiliation. Jamal stood, dusting off his hands. We done here? Ryan's jaw clenched. His pride had just taken the biggest hit of his life. But he didn't say anything. Jamal grabbed his hoodie and walked away, the crowd parting for him. Zarya and Tariq jogged to catch up. That, Tariq said breathlessly, was insane. Zarya smirked. Told you he could handle himself. Jamal sighed. I just wanted a normal day. Tariq laughed. Yeah, well, that ship sailed. As they walked away, Jamal could still feel Ryan's glare burning into his back. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Retaliation in the shadows. The aftermath. Jamal knew it was never just about one fight. Winning against Ryan in front of everyone wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something worse. Ryan's type never let things go. For the next couple of days, Jamal felt the shift in the air. The whispers followed him in the hallways. Teachers raised their eyebrows at him as if they had already heard the rumors. Some students looked at him with newfound respect, but others, the ones who hung around Ryan, had different expressions. Hostility. Suspicion. Payback. Dude, I'm telling you, Ryan's got something planned, Tariq muttered as they walked between classes. He's been way too quiet. Zarya walked alongside them, arms crossed. Yeah, he's definitely not the let-it-go type. He's waiting for the right moment. Jamal sighed, keeping his gaze forward. I don't care what he's planning. I didn't come here to start problems. Tariq chuckled. Yeah, well, the problems found you, man. Jamal already knew that. He'd been through enough schools to recognize the signs. But something told him this time was different. The warning. That evening, Jamal was heading home when he noticed something unusual. His house was on a quiet street, lined with identical houses, well-kept lawns, and neatly trimmed hedges. Nothing ever seemed out of place. Except today. As he walked up to his driveway, something caught his eye, a spray-painted message on his garage door. You don't belong here. Jamal stopped cold. The words were large, dripping red paint down the white door like blood. His chest tightened. He had seen things like this before. Different schools, different cities, same message. His mother hadn't gotten home yet, which was a relief. She didn't need to see this. Jamal turned, scanning the street. A few neighbors were out, walking their dogs, watering their lawns, but no one met his gaze. He wasn't sure if they hadn't seen it happen or if they had just chosen to ignore it. Cowards. Jamal clenched his fists. He knew who had done this. Ryan. This wasn't just a schoolyard fight anymore. This was personal. A late-night ambush. Jamal spent the evening scrubbing the paint off the garage door, his mind running in circles. By the time he finished, he was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. His instincts wouldn't let him rest. Around midnight, he heard something outside. A rustling sound. He sat up in bed, listening. Then, a faint knock at his window. Jamal's pulse quickened. Slowly, he slipped out of bed and moved to the window. He pulled back the curtain, nothing. Just the dark street, quiet and empty. Jamal frowned. Then, a shadow moved near the side of his house. His gut tightened. Someone was out there. Enough. Jamal didn't hesitate. He threw on his sneakers, grabbed his hoodie, and slipped out the back door, moving as silently as a ghost. Years of training had taught him how to move unnoticed, how to track someone without being seen. He crept along the side of the house, keeping low, his eyes sharp. Then he saw them. 3 figures, huddled near his fence. One of them was Ryan. The other 2 were his usual goons, Brett, a heavy-set guy with a mean streak, and Jason, lanky but quick. Jamal's jaw tightened. They had spray paint cans in their hands. They were going to do it again. Jamal inhaled deeply. He had 2 choices, call them out and start another fight, or handle it differently. He chose the second. Silently, he moved closer, using the shadows to his advantage. He positioned himself just a few feet away before speaking. You really that desperate, Ryan? Ryan jerked around, startled. Brett and Jason tensed. Jamal stepped forward, hands in his pockets, completely calm. You lost a fight, so now you're out here like a bunch of cowards with spray cans? That's pathetic. Ryan's expression darkened. You don't get to talk like that, Carter. Jamal tilted his head. Why? Because I embarrassed you in front of your fans? Ryan clenched his fists. Jason muttered, Dude, let's just go. Ryan ignored him. You think you're tough, don't you? Jamal sighed. No, Ryan. I think you're weak. Ryan snapped. He charged, throwing a wild punch. Jamal didn't even blink. He sidestepped, grabbed Ryan's wrist mid-swing, and twisted, fast, fluid, and precise. Ryan yelled in pain as his arm was forced behind his back. Brett and Jason hesitated. They wanted to jump in, but they had already seen what Jamal could do. Jamal leaned in close. "I could break your arm right now." Ryan gritted his teeth, struggling. "But I won't," Jamal said. "Because I'm not like you." He released Ryan with a shove. Ryan stumbled back, face burning with humiliation and rage. Jamal looked at all three of them. "If you ever come near my house again, I won't be so nice." For the first time, Ryan didn't have a comeback. The three of them stood there, frozen, before Brett finally grabbed Ryan's shoulder. "Come on, man." Ryan hesitated, then turned and stormed off. Brett and Jason followed. Jamal watched them disappear into the night. Then, finally, he exhaled. This wasn't over. He knew that. But tonight? Tonight, he won again. The trap is set. A false sense of peace. For the next few days, things at school were quiet. Too quiet. Ryan and his crew stayed away. No taunts. No sneers in the hallway. Nothing. It should have felt like a victory, but Jamal knew better. Bullies don't disappear. They plan. Zarya was the first to say it out loud. "This isn't over," she muttered as they sat in the cafeteria. "Ryan's too proud to take a loss like that. He's just waiting for the right time." Tariq nodded, stabbing his fork into his food. "Yeah, man. I don't trust it. You humiliated him twice. He's gonna come back with something nasty." Jamal leaned back, keeping his expression neutral. He wasn't scared. He'd dealt with worse. But something in his gut told him they were right. Ryan wasn't done. And when he made his move, it wouldn't just be another schoolyard fight. The invitation. It came on a Friday afternoon. Jamal was at his locker when a folded note slipped into the side vent. Frowning, he pulled it out and opened it. Old baseball field. 9 p.m. No teachers. No rules. Let's settle this. No name. But he didn't need one. He knew exactly who it was from. Tariq and Zarya were against it the second they saw the note. "This is a setup, bro," Tariq said. "They're not gonna fight fair. You know that, right?" Zarya crossed her arms. "He's trying to lure you into something. What if they bring weapons? What if they jump you?" Jamal exhaled slowly. He appreciated them looking out for him, but this was something he had to handle. "I know it's a trap," he admitted. "But that doesn't mean I'm gonna run from it." Tariq shook his head. "Man, you don't have to prove anything. You already put Ryan in his place." Jamal met his gaze. "It's not about proving anything. It's about ending this. For good." Zarya narrowed her eyes. "So you're really going?" Jamal nodded. And when he did, he wasn't going unprepared. The dark field. That night, Jamal left his house at 8:45 p.m. He moved carefully, taking the side streets. The old baseball field was at the edge of town, abandoned for years. No cameras. No lights. The perfect place for an ambush. Jamal knew exactly what he was walking into. And that's why he wasn't alone. Tariq and Zarya had followed him, keeping their distance. They had insisted on watching his back, just in case things got out of control. He didn't argue. Jamal stepped onto the dirt field, scanning the area. The grass was overgrown, and the chain-link fence rattled in the wind. Then he saw them. Ryan. Brett. Jason. And 3 other guys Jamal didn't recognize. 6 against 1. Ryan grinned. "Didn't think you'd actually show." Jamal rolled his shoulders, keeping his stance relaxed. "Didn't think you'd need backup." Ryan's grin faltered for a second before he forced out a laugh. This isn't like school, Carter. Out here? There are no teachers to save you. Jamal smirked. I didn't need teachers before. Ryan's expression darkened. You've been walking around like you own this place. Thinking you're better than everyone. That ends tonight. Jamal raised an eyebrow. You mean like when you tried to spray paint my house? Or when you got embarrassed in front of everyone? Ryan's face turned red with anger. You think you're tough? Let's see how tough you are when it's 6-on-1. Jamal's smirk grew. Actually, he said, stepping forward. It's not 6-on-1. Ryan frowned. What? And then, from the darkness, Tariq and Zaria stepped out. Ryan's eyes widened. Brett cursed. Jason took a step back. Jamal folded his arms. Now it's 3-on-6. But if I'm being honest, we don't even need 3. Ryan gritted his teeth. You don't scare me, Carter. Jamal tilted his head. Then do something. Ryan snapped. He lunged. But this time, he didn't come alone. All 6 of them rushed forward at once. The fight. Jamal moved like lightning. Ryan threw the first punch, wild, desperate. Jamal ducked, slammed an elbow into Ryan's ribs, and sent him staggering back. Jason swung from the side. Jamal caught his wrist, twisted, and flipped him onto the ground. Brett charged, trying to tackle him. Jamal sidestepped, using Brett's momentum against him, and sent him crashing into the dirt. Meanwhile, Tariq and Zaria were holding their own. Tariq dodged a swing from one of the unknown guys, then hit him with a brutal right hook that dropped him instantly. Zaria, fast and precise, kicked another guy's legs out from under him, sending him sprawling. It was chaos. Ryan, furious, got back up and grabbed a wooden bat that had been lying in the grass. Jamal barely dodged the first swing. The second came fast, but Jamal caught the bat mid-swing. Ryan's eyes went wide as Jamal yanked it from his grip and snapped it over his knee like it was nothing. Ryan took a step back, suddenly unsure. Jamal stared him down. Still think this was a good idea? Ryan didn't answer. Then, sirens. Someone had called the cops. Ryan panicked. We gotta go. His crew didn't hesitate. They turned and ran, disappearing into the night. Ryan hesitated for half a second, then he ran, too. Jamal watched them go. He wasn't worried. This was over. Ryan had thrown everything at him. And in the end, he still lost. Zaria nudged him. Come on. Let's get out of here before we have to answer any questions. Jamal nodded. As they disappeared into the shadows, one thought crossed his mind. He had one. And this time, Ryan wouldn't be coming back, the end of the war. Escaping the scene. Jamal, Tariq, and Zaria moved quickly through the darkened streets, their breathing still heavy from the fight. The distant wail of sirens echoed behind them, a reminder that the police were on their way. We need to split up, Zaria whispered. If we stay together, it's too obvious. Tariq nodded. Meet back at my place in an hour. Jamal agreed. They each took different paths, disappearing into the night. He cut through an alley, jumping a low fence and slipping through a backstreet until he was far enough from the baseball field to blend in. His heart was still racing, adrenaline making his hands shake. It was over. Ryan and his crew had fled. They had lost. For the first time since coming to this town, Jamal felt like he could breathe. But something in his gut still felt off. This wasn't how things normally ended. Bullies didn't just run away forever. What was Ryan planning next? Jamal shook his head, dismissing the thought. Ryan's pride was shattered. This was over. Or so he thought. The next morning, Jamal barely got any sleep. His mind kept replaying the fight, every punch, every dodge, every moment he had been seconds away from losing. But in the end, he didn't. His body ached, bruises forming on his arms and ribs, but it wasn't anything he couldn't handle. By morning, news had already spread through the school. Whispers followed him through the hallways. People had heard about what happened. Some exaggerated the story, making him sound like some kind of unstoppable warrior. Others just stared at him in awe. For the first time since moving here, no one looked at him with pity or suspicion. They looked at him with respect. Jamal wasn't sure how to feel about that. Tariq grinned when he saw him at his locker. "Bro, you're like a legend now. I heard someone say you took on 15 guys." Jamal chuckled. "Yeah, that sounds about right." Zarya leaned against the lockers. "Ryan's not here today. Neither is Jason or Brett." Jamal's smile faded. "Suspended?" She shook her head. "I don't know. But I have a feeling this isn't the end of it." Jamal sighed. "Yeah, me too. Ryan's last move. It happened after school." Jamal was walking home, alone for once, his guard finally lowered. That's when he saw them. Ryan. Jason. Brett. And someone else. A man. Tall, broad shoulders, tattoos creeping up his arms. He leaned against a black car, arms crossed. Older. Meaner. More dangerous. Ryan smirked. "You think you won, Carter?" Jamal stopped, his instincts screaming at him. Ryan nodded toward the man. "This is my cousin, Daryl. He just got out of prison. And he doesn't like people messing with family." Daryl cracked his knuckles. "I hear you like to fight, kid." Jamal's jaw clenched. This was different. Ryan wasn't coming at him with schoolyard tactics anymore. This was something else entirely. "Walk away, Ryan," Jamal said calmly. "You don't want this." Ryan laughed. "Oh, I do. I really do." Daryl stepped forward. "Come on, tough guy. Let's see what you got." Jamal took a slow breath. Then, a voice from behind. "He's not fighting alone." Jamal turned. Tariq. Zarya. And, to his surprise, half the football team. Jamal wasn't the only one Ryan had bullied. He wasn't the only one who had been pushed around. And now, when it mattered most, he wasn't alone. Ryan's smirk faded. Daryl looked at the group and scoffed. "You serious?" Jamal stepped forward, meeting his gaze. "I don't need to fight you, Daryl. You don't even go to this school. You're a grown man trying to fight a kid. What do you think happens when the cops show up?" Daryl hesitated. Then Zarya spoke, pulling out her phone. "Because they're already on their way." Ryan's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" Brett cursed. Daryl glared at her. "You little." Jamal didn't let him finish. He took another step forward, locking eyes with Ryan. "This is done," he said firmly. "You lost. Move on." For the first time, Ryan looked unsure. Daryl clenched his jaw, glancing around. Too many witnesses. Finally, he exhaled sharply and shook his head. "You're lucky, kid." Ryan hesitated, then muttered something under his breath and turned away. Jamal watched as they got into the car and drove off. Tariq grinned. "Man, I was ready to throw hands." Zarya sighed. "I'm just glad we didn't have to." Jamal smiled faintly. He felt it, too. It was finally over. Ryan wouldn't be coming back. And if he did, Jamal wasn't afraid. The final lesson. The next day at school was different. People weren't whispering about the fight anymore. They weren't staring at Jamal like he was some kind of mythical warrior. They just treated him like him. For the first time, he felt like he belonged. Tariq threw an arm around his shoulder. You know, for a new guy, you're not so bad. Jamal chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. Zarya smirked. So, does this mean we can actually have a normal school year now? Jamal grinned. I hope so. And for the first time since moving to Willow Creek, he actually believed it. No more running. No more fights. Just a fresh start. A real one. And this time, it would last.